Presenter for the evening is a very accomplished, award-winning Canadian journalist named Barry Zwicker, whose new film is called The Great Conspiracy, the 9/11 media special you never saw. Barry Zwicker.
Those who ignore history are condemned to repeat it, wrote Santa Anna. History is bunk, said Henry Ford. Of the two, I'm more with Ford. The problem with Santa Anna's thoughtful quote is that it assumes history is accessible enough to be ignored. The allure of Ford's seemingly anti-intellectual outburst is that it reminds us that history can be complete fiction. But I haven't been able to find anyone to quote on what seems to me to be the most significant point of all about history, namely that much, perhaps most, significant history is hidden. I.F. Stone wrote a book called The Hidden History of the Korean War. Daniel Burston wrote Hidden History, Exploring Our Secret Past. And I thank Jamie Hecht for that. He found that title on the internet today. Thank you, Jamie. Howard Zinn wrote essentially an alternative history a lot of you know about, A People's History of the United States. And more recently, Michael Parenti wrote History as Mystery. But, yes, unfortunately, Michael Parenti, my friend, is very, very poor on 9/11. For some reason, like Noam Chomsky, he just can't seem to get his head around this. It's a mystery to me. But the most lethal hidden histories, pound for pound, are the false flag operations that Webster Tarpley mentioned. These are the state-sponsored or rogue network toxic deceptions in which an actual attack on one's own country is engineered for the purpose of mobilizing public opinion, usually behind the war agenda of the invisible government and the ruling deceivers. Now, these deceptions tend to be turning points of history, leading to terrible loss of life and even downward spirals for whole countries. The book, Great War-Triggering Deceptions of All Time, is yet to be written. But when it is, it will be very thick and of utmost importance. And if it is written, I cannot think of an author more qualified and capable of writing it than Webster G. Tarpley. One more quote by an American cultural critic, Larry Ray. Again, thank you, Jamie. I couldn't remember the name, and Jamie found it. I didn't have access to the internet today. Jamie Ray wrote, "Anniversaries are reservoirs of sacred power." I saw this firsthand this morning at Ground Zero. But there is something more sacred than any commemorative occasion. And that is the search for truths about turning point events, specifically tonight, about the events of 9/11. You're owed at least two relevant examples of previous deceptions, and that's all there's time for. First, Pearl Harbor, the original outrage. Robert B. Stinnett's book, Day of Deceit, is, in my opinion, by far the most comprehensive work on the subject. A former U.S. naval officer, Stinnett invested 17 years in research, and he liberated 100,000 previously classified documents. To brutally summarize Day of Deceit, it proves, to my satisfaction at least, that for a year before Pearl Harbor, FDR had a plan, specifically an 8-point plan, to provoke the Japanese into attacking U.S. forces or facilities. He repeatedly emphasized that it must be the case that the Japanese fire the first shot. And what a shot it was. It required that a significant part of the U.S. fleet be made vulnerable, that those responsible for protecting that fleet have one or both hands tied behind their backs, that the Japanese remain unaware that all their codes right up through the high command had been broken, and broken good. The day before Pearl Harbor, according to the Gallup poll, just 16% of the U.S. public supported this country entering World War II. the day after Pearl Harbor, 1 million men volunteered to fight in that war. That stingingly effective deception, at least, was in service of adding another powerful ally to the struggle to defeat Nazi Germany. And I, for one, retroactively endorse that. But such an ethically warranted fraud, if I may use that phrase, is virtually a lone exception to the rule in this sordid category. Typical, on the other hand, was the supposed attack by North Vietnamese torpedo boats in early August 1964 on 2 U.S. destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin. And I believe this has been referred to earlier in the evening. That's a problem when you come last. The supposed attack on the U.S. destroyers Maddox and Turner Joy was a sham. Navy Commander James Stockdale, later who was Ross Perot's vice presidential candidate, was flying cover in the Tonkin Gulf that night. Our destroyers were firing at phantom targets, he wrote later. There was nothing there but black water and American firepower. Lyndon Johnson, nevertheless, went on TV to deceive the American people and the Congress. The result was overwhelming support for immediate passage of the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, which was the sole legal basis for the Vietnam War, the loss of 3 million Vietnamese lives and 58,000 American ones, and creation of a schism in the U.S. body politic that continues to this day. Emblematic, and the media have been mentioned here without praise earlier this evening, and after 33 years as a media critic, I can't find any fault with that. Emblematic of media malfeasance and supine service of illegitimate power then and now, the New York Times, after LBJ's speech, editorialized that, quote, "The president went to the American people last night with the somber facts," unquote. The most somber fact is that if we, the people, cannot force today's top hidden history into the open, a cascade of calamitous events is very likely to ensue. And my main prayer is that I am wrong. Thank you.
You've been so patient. We've been talking up here a lot, showing you a lot of information. We invite you now. We have roamers out there with microphones to get your questions for the panel. So you can put some tough questions, some questions of any sort that you like. We have people out there with microphones, and we're going to get people to ask a question.
Where exactly are Rice and Powell in this whole dance? I only heard one person say something about Condoleezza Rice, but also Colin Powell, so those two.
Powell did not want to go along with the program. And he was basically pressured to sell the war to sell the war on Iraq. He was in the White House at the time when post 9/11 they were trying to ride that terror wave into Iraq. There were a number of offices, and I'm sure many of you have heard of them. Within the administration, there was the White House Information Group with Condoleezza Rice and company, who were they were the messengers, and the messages were being formulated for them to send out at the same time to sell the war, and the images of the mushroom clouds. And then there was the Office of Special Plans for cherry-picking intelligence and putting it together in a way, again, that would sell disinformation to the American public. And part of the Office of Special Plans was also to put pressure on high-level people in the CIA, the NSA, and even Colin Powell not to go along with the program. But unfortunately, he buckled, and he's trying to get Bob Woodward to sort of write his mea culpa in a sense, but he was a big man in a tight spot, and he did not, I think, acquit himself very, very well. He didn't stand up and call a halt to the madness.
Rice took over as National Security Advisor